Mike Davis is a radical scholar, historian, educator, and writer, and he has authored a number of very important books, including City of Quartz and The Monster at Our Door, Buddha's Wagon. He co-authored with Justin Akers Chacon the book No One is Illegal, Fighting Violence and State Repression on the U.S.-Mexico Border. He joins us today on Against the Grain. My name is CS, and we have links to a couple articles and a book by Mike Davis on againstthegrain.org. Exploring this question of workers and worker solidarity a bit more, let's make some comparisons, if we could, between today and the 1930s and the mobilization of industrial workers back then and the power of the labor movement today. And does this also fit within your sense that what we're experiencing today is much different than the Great Depression?
Well, first of all, in the obvious sense, that the kind of national economic space, the jobs, the means of production were in the United States. The whole question is how to get them reemployed. Now, a very large number of Americans, as with other workers across the world, are parts of a huge international division of labor. And it's hard to envision struggles of the 1930s kinds without unprecedented degrees of solidarity and cooperation. And although I think you may see the Pat Buchanan types growing more, becoming much louder over the next few years, and schemes of protectionism and defending American jobs against a hostile world, that's become an utter dead end. That's been the accomplishment of globalization, is that it's divided in the first instance workers across the world, but it's reorganized them into huge product chains and interdependencies. And so the question is how to build, power within those internationalized systems of production.
What does it mean for workers that we've moved from a manufacturing-based economy to a deindustrialized, service-based economy? What does that mean for labor's ability to bring people together and mobilize people?
Well, it means that you've lost one of the foremost platforms of power in society, which is control over social production. The ability to exercise power of labor in crucial nodes of manufacturing production. I mean, the American industrial working class is far from extinct, but most of us now work in a service economy that's to some extent polarized between two halves. People who work in health services, to some extent people who work in the hotel, hospitality sector, work in the equivalent of factories, large socialized units of production, and industries which have fairly high profit margins. So there's a lot of space there to negotiate better wages and form strong unions. But far too many Americans, particularly new immigrants, work in small, badly capitalized, extremely exploitive industries, or dependent on small swings in the big business cycle, or inflated levels of demand, or simply auxiliary time workers. And everybody's been talking about this new precariousness of employment for a generation. Well, it's going to come home in a massively sad and destructive way, I think, over the next year, as we see unemployment multiply, across these sectors.
Indeed. This is Against the Grain on Pacifica Radio, online at kpfa.org. The associate producer is H.N. Ewan. Jim Bennett is at the controls. My name is C.S. Song, and Mike Davis, journalist, author, urban theorist, political activist, joins us today by phone to talk about a range of issues. We're talking actually about an article posted on TomDispatch.com by Mike Davis entitled, "Can Obama See the Grand Canyon? On Presidential Blindness and Economic Catastrophe." We have a link to that article on againstthegrain.org. You referred to Keynesianism earlier, named after John Maynard Keynes, the British economist who died in the 1940s. Can you briefly describe what that is and indicate to us, continuing along with this parallel or trying to make an analogy between now and the 1930s, the degree to which military Keynesianism helped the U.S. recover from the Depression, and whether military Keynesianism today could do the same, or I should say in the near future might do the same?
Well, first of all, the New Deal is only Keynesian in retrospect. Keynes-specific ideas didn't have that great an influence. What was influential, and particularly argued in the industrial unions, the Congress of Industrial Organizations, was the idea that the Depression, the root cause of the Depression, is that wages were too low to ensure that consumption demand kept up with the constantly revolutionized abilities to produce more and more goods. In short, auto workers couldn't afford to buy automobiles. Not enough carpenters could afford their own homes. And Keynesianism is a theory of, in a sense, of saving capitalism through state intervention that adjusts that demand by creating employment projects, by government spending. And the New Deal really never got a full chance to prove itself. In 1938, a coalition of Republicans and conservative Democrats put the brakes on and brought some of the most successful New Deal programs, like the Works Progress Administration, almost to halt. We actually got out of the Depression only with the beginning of Lend-Lease, the militarization of the U.S. economy 18 months before Pearl Harbor. And in those days, military spending, rearming the country, put people to work in almost every industry you can imagine, from textiles to auto plants to constructions. And for the first time, Americans were fully employed again in a generation, and they doubled the size of the U.S. economy in the course of the Second World War. And that then laid a basis for the consensus politics of Republican and Democratic administrations that high levels of military spending were, one of the best solutions to problems of insufficient demand, solutions to recession. But in a way, this military Keynesianism showed its limits during the Vietnam War, when Lyndon Johnson attempted, on one hand, to revive New Deal programs in the form of the war on poverty and fight a genocidal war in Southeast Asia. And at the end of the day, the cost of the war was the abandonment of the war on poverty and the ambitious domestic goals of the Kennedy-Johnson years. And I think we're facing a situation today where when the Democrats take power next January, they face a zero-sum choice between expanding war in the Middle East, intensified intervention in Afghanistan, possible confrontations with Iran, and the kind of modest domestic program of $300 billion devoted to raising demand and creating jobs at home. In other words, they'll face the same choice that LBJ did, but under much more stark circumstances. At this point, increasing military spending, doesn't reemploy Americans in any substantial number, but it does undercut the ability to raise domestic spending or to provide relief programs to unemployment.